As designers, we tend to see ourselves a certain way. We're the problem solvers, we're the strategic thinkers, we're the people who bring clarity when nobody else can. And if we're being completely honest, we also tend to assume that everybody else sees us that way too. And a lot of us tend to think that the rest of the team values design the same way that we value design. But what if they don't? Stick around, because today we're going to explore that gap between how designers see themselves and how they're actually seen inside an organization, and why understanding that gap might be one of the most important soft skills you will ever build. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome. I am super stoked to have you. How often do you stare at a blank Figma canvas, unsure where to start? Well, this episode is brought to you by Mobbin, the ultimate UI and UX design inspiration library. Mobbin gives you instant access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows from apps you love, and content is added weekly, so you never have to start from scratch again. Quickly find exactly what you need, search by app category, UI patterns, or even specific features. And my team and I use Mobbin daily at work to find useful patterns, and it helps my team work much more efficiently. So you're ready to level up your design process? Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for all their support. And for more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So there's a gap between how we see ourselves and how we're seen, and that gap matters because it shapes how we show up. It shapes how we advocate for our work and how we advocate for promotions and raises and how we interpret resistance. And sometimes that gap is driven by this quiet overestimation that design and designers hold the same weight for everybody else that it holds for us, and it usually doesn't end up well for design teams, which is why I'm so excited to have Andy Vitale on. He has spent years leading designs inside large orgs. He's navigated financial realities most low-level ICs never think about, and he's managed emotional situations that as ICs we will likely never see. He's had to advocate for design without assuming that it's automatically the center of the universe. Andy, first, thank you so much for your work. And then second, thank you so much for coming on Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to have you on. How's it going?
Awesome, Jeremy. Thank you so much. I think when we finally got to meet in person in Silver Spring, Maryland last year,
Yeah,
it
dude.
was like, how have we not done this before? But I'm super excited to be here, super excited to get to chat more formally than we have.
We talk a lot in the show about the importance of soft skills and things like that, but I feel like there's this soft skill you talked about as corporate citizen, being a good corporate citizen and understanding the context and how we show up at work. We could have the most amazing designs in the world, but if we don't understand the context, that work is never going to get shipped. I would love to understand what it was like when you got to that point in your career when you realized, oh my God, as an IC, I have been thinking about this all wrong. Here's how I should have actually been approaching my work.
I think about the question, when did I have that mindset shift? And there was a time when I was at 3M and I was working as an IC on medical devices and software for medical devices. What I realized in that organization is design was 1/100% of the people in the company were designers. Everyone else were scientists, marketers, business people, subject matter experts, technologists, right? And then that's when you realize that like everybody is speaking different languages to some extent, but really have the best outcomes in mind for our customers. And that's when I also realized that design wasn't the center of the corporate universe. It was a contributor to success. So we all had different lenses and different metrics that we were looking for, but success meant the same thing. It was, do we put the right thing in our customers' hands?
A lot of designers, especially online, social media, YouTube, Twitter, whatever, a lot of talk about startups and design founders and design teams and people delivering really beautiful, sexy UIs and things like that. You see a lot of that and you assume that is the norm for most designers in most organizations. But when you start to work, especially in a large corporate environment, you start to realize very quickly that you are the odd man out. There's a disconnect between the reality of most corporate jobs and what we see online all the time?
Having worked in a lot of large organizations, you realize that there are certain areas that you try to carve out as a design space, but you're kind of seen as this group of oddities, right? That approach things a different way than most people and aren't the most buttoned up in certain situations. For the most part, I think as we've learned to operate within the confines of a large organization, we don't lose our identity of who we are and the things that make us the individuals that we are, but we don't seem as ragtag group of people that are in this organization. We're kind of more embedded with the people that we work with, and we still look for those moments, whether those be critiques or times to have our design moment to really make sure that we're putting the right eye on the things and elevating our craft.
I want to get into this perception gap between how designers see themselves and how most people in the organization view design. Before we start talking about like how to fix things, I want to maybe level set and really drill into the problem as you see it. When we have that perception gap, when designers see themselves a certain way and everyone else on the team sees them a little bit differently, what types of issues does that gap actually cause?
Even before I go there, I'd like to define a little bit of the corporate citizenship that we talked about, right?
Yeah, sure,
Because
let's do it.
it sounds very corporate. But ultimately, when we think of ourselves as humans, we think that we're part of the global citizenship, right? It's about doing good for the people that are our neighbors, leaving the world in a better place than we inherited it. So we have this lens that we pay attention to, yet sometimes when we go into an organization where we spend the most time with people, we think of ourselves as a group of designers, or we work on a product team, and these are the people that we collaborate with most, but we don't realize that we've made this conscious decision to work at this organization, and it's a choice of ours that we make. Yet we don't always show the same empathy for the people that we work with as we do for the people that we're designing for. We're all in this together. We all have positive intent. And we are part of this community of people that work at this company. How do we help our coworker as much as how do we help our neighbor? It really is just fine tuning that way of thinking and realizing I'm here to actually help people build the right solution for our customers so that we provide the value to them so that they continue to give this company their money so that we can stay employed here. Even in the advent of AI, where a lot of the technology teams are speeding up the way that they work along with us, they're going to be met with, but does this solve the business problem, right? It's cool that we can ship this idea faster, but how do we start to understand what the business needs from us in a way that we can articulate that back? And what's really important there is it's not taught in school. And I think that's where being a good corporate citizen is actually part of that. There's a curiosity, there's a wanting to learn, there's a wanting to bring our value to the table, but there's also respecting what other people's expertise is and being able to merge those two together. And I don't think that we need to be in every meeting that takes place, but it is important to be in the room where decisions get made. I see designers on my team that come out of this room, maybe they were on Slack, someone else is pinging me. Your team's kind of just looks like they're chatting with each other during this meeting. And there's a moment in that meeting for them to really like raise questions, raise concerns, and they just kind of like sit quiet, walk out of the room, and then you hear this like dissent after fragmentation of a decision that was made after they leave the room. And that perception just doesn't get over well. Why is your team not on board? Why are they not happy with the decisions? Why did they not raise their voice? And I think that that perception starts to impact design teams and design leaders more than you even realize. Quiet in the meeting, but dissent outside, like that's not a great look. I think in other places, design is seen as wanting to get it perfect. And because of that, they're seen as more of a speed bump than an accelerant. And designers never see themselves as that, right? They're like, I'm working really fast. I'm trying to come up with the right idea and I want to iterate on it and I want to continue to iterate on it. But really, in the way that we work today and the tools that we have that are accessible to us, it doesn't have to be perfect to get feedback on it right away and to get feedback on it from real customers or real internal subject matter experts. We don't need to sit and iterate for 3 weeks through 50 critiques on the same idea and go through everything that may or may not work and what has to be perfect for this to exist. Those are two different disconnects that I think designers really need to be aware of because those conversations are constantly happening.
How does it feel to work with a designer who doesn't get it on a day-to-day basis? What does that look like?
It makes it really difficult, right? I think we always see the design perspective of what it's like to work with other people, but we don't really shift that focus inward and realize that we're working with people that are just trying to bring an idea to life and get it to market that they feel is a very viable solution for a problem that the business is facing. It's been described to me as like hitting a wall constantly. Every time that I'm trying to explain something, there's this deep questioning to the core of the idea that I have of the thing that I'm doing. But it's not far off from conversations that we've been having. So instead of meeting that head on and trying to articulate differently, I think what has happened is we're starting to see teams wanting to work around us instead of with us. And for me, that's a sign of not a great working relationship.
I want to talk about what is a mature designer, somebody who actually gets it, those signals when you're working with your design team. As a design manager, what are some things that you start to identify that identify those people on the team really are understanding how to interact and work with the larger organization?
Yeah, I think it's really collaboration and you can hear collaboration come through in many ways. Sometimes there's a critique and there are just designers in the room. And that's okay. There are times when it needs to just be like that. But when you start to hear, "Hey, you know what? Can my product manager come because I'd really like them to put eyes on this now and get their feedback this early in the process." Like that's showing me that someone is working as part of a team.
I want to dig into now some of your thoughts as a design executive. I want to hear from your perspective a little bit about how, as individual contributors, we can start to understand and empathize with you and your role, and maybe not even just you as a design leader, but at that level, people in the boardrooms, people making decisions. What kind of pressures are they under? What kind of things are they held accountable for? What do ICs fundamentally misunderstand about leadership? What do we pushing pixels around not understand that you're going through?
I love that question. But ideally, the first thing is when you are an executive in an organization, even though you lead a specific function, your responsibility tends to shift away from that function at times to overall business decisions and business health decisions. So at times, while I am responsible for design and how design shows value to meet the company objectives, I'm also helping select technology tools and making decisions that impact people in the organization and policies that the organization has. When we think about companies overall, there's a board that the company is accountable for and helps shift and direct decisions that the company makes to be successful and to navigate uncertainties in the market. So while I would love to be in every single design critique, there are other conversations that are very valuable to the business that allow design to make decisions later on that they need to make. So we are always accountable to making sure that the ship is being steered in the right direction. Beyond that though, it's about how do I amplify the work that the team is doing and making sure that everyone that are my peers don't look at it specifically as design or aesthetic. They understand how it's unlocking experiences for our customers, how it's contributing to revenue, how it's helping us achieve goals that are wider than what the design team may have as the goal for the product. So a lot of my job is trying to unblock for the team in helping the organization unlock that value through design. So it's a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of trying to elevate the team to have those conversations as well, but it's also mitigating a lot of organizational risk at times. And what people also don't seem to realize is there are so many things happening all at once. I have to be up to speed on all of the other things, because at any point in the day, anyone in the organization may be like, well, what's happening over there? Or what's happening on this thing that isn't the highest priority in the company? But at the end of the day, the thing also that people don't realize is that leadership are accountable for all of the decisions and all of the things that the team is working on. So if parts of the team aren't successful, that is not success for their leader. The leader is unsuccessful. So for us, it's we've got to coordinate all of the parts and pieces for the team to make sure that success for them equals success for me. I try to make time for every single person at the drop of a hat, because to me, the team is most important. It's how I get to amplify and show the value. But it's hard. There's so many things happening with people. People get into an accident over the weekend. People have a family member that's sick. People have an animal that they have to put down. People have deaths in the family. Sometimes there's deaths on the team that have to be communicated in a way. There's just so many things that you don't think about that weigh you down because you care so deeply about the team and the people. Context switching is so real. I may literally have just come out of a conversation with someone that's going through a divorce. And then I have to jump in straight from that to a conversation with someone whose kid just got accepted to college. You have to show up through those lenses, and people don't realize what you're coming out of and what you're going into from a day-to-day basis.
Similar to our question before about showing up differently at work, if an IC truly understood everything you're going through, how would they show up differently from your perspective?
Looking for asynchronous feedback at times is helpful. The behavior that I wouldn't want is I wouldn't want them to think that I'm too busy for them. Because at the end of the day, supporting them is the job. But what I would love is if you have an idea on how we can do things better, tell me how we can do things better. If you can just say, look, I just came out of this meeting, we had this conversation, I think the priorities misaligned, this is the piece that I'm picking up on, this is what I think it should be doing. I can take that without having a conversation and just ping someone else. I just heard this coming out of this meeting. Where are we not aligned, so that we can start to solve that problem for you rather than me move into this negative space that you're in. It's really helpful if they can start to like meet me a little bit of the way so that I could go to work for them.
What is one just really uncomfortable truth that designers need to hear about how they're perceived outside of their own little insular design team?
I had a product manager that used to tell me, your team is so precious. They can't handle feedback well. Once they hear feedback, they get insulted by it and they shut down. Designers need to understand that we are not our work. And we admit to not being our work, but we let that sting last a little bit too long when someone gives us the feedback that we say that we want. How do we start to not be so precious? That's not the reputation that you want. And I think designers need to hear that.
All right, Andy, this has been an awesome conversation. Before we get out of here, let everybody know where they can find you and all the stuff you got going on. Give yourself a plug.
Just LinkedIn. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect. I'm happy to help however I can. I know it's a tough time out there, so anything that I can do to provide guidance or help, I'm happy to. Anything you need to find out about me is on LinkedIn.
Right on. You ask questions about design, sneakers, coffee, anything you want. Andy is an open book. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much once again for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. Super happy to be on and enjoyed our conversation.